The silver blade hummed against her throat, a cold reminder that in the kingdom of Galdoria, a human heartbeat was nothing more than a rhythmic countdown to execution. The Lycan King wants her as a wife, but what awaits them could destroy everything. Elisa Bennet, her first name a whisper from the shape of water, her last name a legacy from pride and prejudice, stared into the amber, predatory eyes of the man who held the world's most terrifying throne. The air in the great hall was thick with the scent of wet earth, crushed pine needles and the metallic tang of fear. To the 100 Lycan lords watching from the shadows, she was a stray, a piece of meat accidentally invited to a banquet of wolves. But to the king she was something else. Something impossible. Say it, the king growled, his voice a low vibration that rattled the very marrow of Elisa's bones. Tell them why you were found at the forbidden altar. Tell them why the silver didn't burn you. Elisa's pulse thundered. She was a simple weaver from the lowlands, or so she had told herself for 21 years. But as she looked at the towering figure of King Tristan Ludlow, his first name borrowed from legends of the fall, his last name from the Dark Night, she realized the secret she carried wasn't just a burden. It was a fuse. And it had just been lit. Hello to all of you incredible souls tuning in today. I am so thrilled to have you here for this journey. Before we dive deeper into this shadow-drenched world of ancient bloodlines and forbidden desire, I have to ask, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far our community reaches. How are you all doing? I hope you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and join our family. We are building something special here and your support means the world to me. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the moon rises over Galdoria. Tristan stepped closer, the heat radiating from his massive frame nearly wilting Elisa's resolve. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a god carved from obsidian and moonlight. He was the Lycan King, a creature of myth who had united the warring clans through sheer, brutal force. His power was absolute, his word was law, and his heart was rumored to be a stone. Yet as his hand reached out, not to strike but to cup her jaw, his touch was unexpectedly electric. It wasn't the touch of a predator claiming prey. It was the touch of a man recognizing a missing piece of his own soul. I, Tristan Ludlow, he announced, his voice booming against the vaulted stone ceiling, claim this woman. Not as a servant. Not as a concubine. I claim Elisa Bennet as my queen. My wife. The lunar matriarch of the High Pack. A deafening silence fell over the hall, followed by a roar of outrage from the high-ranking elders. A human? A commoner? It was an insult to their blood. It was a violation of the sacred pact. But Elisa wasn't focused on the angry wolves or the flashing claws. She was focused on the way Tristan's eyes softened for a fraction of a second when they met hers. He was protecting her, yes, but he was also walking into a trap he didn't even know existed. Because Elisa knew something Tristan didn't. She knew that the ordinary woman he was holding was the last carrier of the Silver Blight, a dormant celestial curse that, once triggered by a Lycan's bond, would systematically extinguish every shifter soul in the kingdom. As the king pulled her into his chest, declaring a union that would change history, Elisa felt a cold shiver of dread. He wanted her as a wife, but their first kiss wouldn't just seal a marriage. It would start the countdown to the extinction of his entire race. The weight of the crown Tristan Ludlow had metaphorically placed on Elisa's head felt heavier than any iron shackle. As she was whisked away from the snarling council and into the opulent, moon-drenched chambers of the high tower, the reality of her situation began to claw at her throat. She wasn't just a guest, she was a golden bird in a cage made of ancient grudges. Elisa Bennet stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her fingers trembling as she traced the intricate embroidery of her linen tunic. Her deepest desire had always been simple: to belong. Growing up in the borderlands, she was too other for the humans and too fragile for the wolves. She had spent her life hiding the silver-white birthmark on her inner thigh, the mark of the blight, praying it would never wake. Her fear wasn't death, it was being the hand that pulled the trigger on a massacre. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass, seeing a woman who was a walking biological weapon, now promised to the very man who ruled the species she was destined to destroy. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like sharpened flint stepped in. This was Evelyn Crawley, her first name from the Mummy, her last name from Sherlock Holmes. As the head matriarch and Tristan's aunt, Evelyn was the keeper of the pack's history. "You walk with a grace that doesn't belong to a weaver," Evelyn said, her voice a dry rasp. She circled Elisa like a shark sensing blood in the water. "The king thinks he found a miracle. I think he found a parasite. Do you know what happens to parasites in this pack, girl? We burn them out." The emotional stakes were suffocating. Elisa realized that Tristan wasn't just fighting the council. He was fighting his own bloodline to keep her alive. But why? Later that night, Tristan entered. He had discarded his heavy furs, wearing only a silk shirt that clung to the powerful muscles of his chest. He looked tired, not the fatigue of a warrior, but the exhaustion of a man carrying the world on his shoulders. He sat at the edge of the hearth, the firelight dancing in his amber eyes. "My people think I've lost my mind," he said quietly, not looking at her. "They see a human. They don't see what I see." "And what do you see, Tristan?" Elisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up then, and the raw vulnerability in his gaze shattered her. "I see the end of my loneliness. For 300 years the kings of Galdoria have ruled in silence. We are powerful, yes, but we are fading. Our birth rates are dropping, our spirits are darkening. When I saw you at the altar, the wolf inside me, it didn't want to hunt. It wanted to rest." He revealed his deepest secret. The Lycan race was dying from a spiritual rot, and he believed a union with a pure human soul, the mythical lunar bridge, was the only way to anchor their fading magic. He didn't realize that the purity he sensed in Elisa was actually the dormant, sterile cold of the silver blight. The irony was a jagged blade in Elisa's heart. He loved her because he thought she was his salvation while she was actually his executioner. "I have enemies, Elisa," Tristan continued, reaching out to take her hand. His skin was unnaturally warm. "My cousin Victor Thorn, Underworld for the first name, the last of the Mohicans for the last, believes only blood and war can save us. He will try to kill you to save me. Stay close to me. Do not trust the shadows." As he pressed a kiss to her knuckles, Elisa felt a surge of desperate affection. She wanted to scream the truth, to run away and save him from herself. But looking into his eyes, she saw a hope so bright it blinded her. She was the one thing keeping him from falling into the darkness of his own crown. "We're just getting started, and the web is already tightening around Elisa and Tristan. What do you think is worse? A secret that kills, or a lie told to protect the person you love? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're enjoying the tension, make sure you've hit that like button so I know you want more of this story." The night ended with Tristan leaving her to her thoughts, but the silence was soon broken. A small, frantic scratching came from the servants' passage. A young girl no older than 10 slipped through. Selena Kyle, Batman and Catwoman, a kitchen stray with wide, terrified eyes. "They're coming," the girl hissed. "Victor's men. They aren't waiting for the wedding. They're going to prove you aren't the bridge tonight." Elisa's heart hammered against her ribs. The foundation of her new life was already cracking. She wasn't just a bride. She was a target in a civil war she didn't understand, carrying a plague she couldn't control. The air in the high tower didn't just grow cold. It turned stagnant, as if the very oxygen was being sucked out by the approach of something predatory. Selena Kyle vanished back into the shadows just as the heavy oak doors didn't just open. They exploded off their hinges. The wood splintered like matchsticks, and through the dust stepped a man who looked like Tristan's dark reflection. Victor Thorn. His presence was a physical weight, his eyes not amber like the king's, but a bloodshot crimson that spoke of forbidden lunar rituals. Behind him stood 4 enforcers, their fingernails already elongating into obsidian talons. "The king is blinded by his own desperation," Victor sneered, his voice like grinding stones. "He thinks you are a bridge, little human. I think you are a crack in our foundation. And I've always been good at demolition." Elisa backed away until her spine hit the freezing stone of the balcony railing. The drop behind her was 300 feet of jagged shale and crashing waterfalls. "Tristan will kill you for this," she breathed, her hand instinctively flying to her thigh, where the blight mark began to pulse with a sickly rhythmic heat. "Tristan will thank me when he sees your head on a pike and realizes his miracle was just meat," Victor countered. He lunged. But he didn't reach her. A blur of silver and shadow tore through the room. Tristan Ludlow didn't just enter. He descended like a falling star. He didn't even shift into his full wolf form, he didn't need to. His hand caught Victor's throat midair, the impact sounding like a whip crack. The two powerful Lycans slammed into the far wall, the masonry cracking behind them. "I gave an order, Victor," Tristan roared, his voice slipping into a guttural, animalistic register. "She is mine. Touch her again and I will tear your heart out and feed it to the crows." "Look at her," Victor choked out, pointing a trembling claw toward Elisa. "Look at her eyes, Tristan. That isn't human light." Tristan turned, and for the first time he saw it. Elisa's eyes weren't their usual soft hazel. They were glowing with a terrifying ethereal silver, the exact color of the moon's surface. The first major plot twist struck like lightning. As Tristan's protective aura flared, it acted as a catalyst. The silver blight wasn't just a curse, it was a sentient anchor. The moment the Lycan King touched her to pull her away from the ledge, a shock wave of white light erupted from the point of contact. The enforcers were thrown back, howling as the light seared their fur. But Tristan didn't let go. Instead, his eyes widened in agonizing shock. He wasn't being burned, he was being drained. "Elisa," he gasped, his knees hitting the floor. What are you?" The secret was out, but not in the way she expected. The ancient law of the pack stated that any being capable of hurting the king was an omega threat, and must be neutralized. But as the silver light faded, leaving Elisa trembling and Tristan weakened, the king did something that defied every law of his kind. He stood up, wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, and looked at his horrified council members who were now pouring into the room. "She didn't attack me," Tristan lied, his voice steady despite his pale face. She saved me. Victor used a poisoned blade and she drew the toxin out. She is more than a bridge. She is our healer." The room erupted in whispers. It was a blatant lie, a desperate gamble to keep her from the executioner's block. Elisa looked at him, her heart breaking. He was willing to commit treason against his own crown to protect a woman who was accidentally killing him. The stakes just hit the ceiling. Tristan is lying to his entire kingdom to protect Elisa, but that silver light, it's hungry. Do you think Tristan is being brave, or is he being a fool for love? Type brave or fool in the comments right now. I want to see whose side you're on. And hey, if you're gripping your phone tight right now, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the fallout of this lie. As the council was ushered out, Victor Thorne lingered at the door, his eyes narrowing. He knew the king was lying. He had felt the sterility of that light. Tristan turned to Elisa, the room finally quiet. The romantic tension was now laced with a lethal edge of fear. He walked to her, his movements slow. "You have to tell me," he whispered, his hands hovering near her face but not touching. "What is the silver blight, Elisa? And why does it feel like my soul just recognized its own killer?" The revelation hung between them, a ghost in the room. The inciting incident hadn't just launched a conflict. It had declared a war between their hearts and their very natures. The aftermath of the attack didn't bring peace. It brought a suffocating, electric stillness. Tristan had declared Elisa a healer to save her life, but that lie now hung over the castle like a guillotine blade. To maintain the ruse, Elisa was moved from the guest quarters into the king's private wing, a labyrinth of black marble and wolf pelt rugs where the air always hummed with Tristan's predatory warmth. "You shouldn't have lied for me," Elisa whispered. They were in the solar, the moon outside a bloated, silver eye watching them. Tristan stood by the hearth, his shirt discarded as he tended to the blackened veins on his forearm, the literal scorched earth left behind by Elisa's touch. "I didn't lie to save a healer," Tristan said, his voice dropping to a gravelly register that made Elisa's skin prickle. "I lied to save my wife." He stepped toward her, and for the first time Elisa didn't pull away. The romantic subplot wasn't just blooming, it was catching fire. Tristan reached out, his movements agonizingly slow, giving her every chance to retreat. When his hand finally cupped her cheek, the sensation wasn't the violent explosion from earlier. It was a low, thrumming heat. "The silver blight," she choked out, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Tristan, it's a parasite of the soul. My ancestors were hunters who were cursed by the first Lycan King. We carry a vacuum where magic should be. If we bond, if we truly connect, I will hollow you out until there's nothing left but a husk." Tristan's thumb traced her lower lip. "Then let me be hollowed out." I have spent 3 centuries full of nothing but duty and blood. If you are my end, Elisa Bennet, then at least I'll die feeling something other than the weight of this crown. The tension snapped as he leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. It was an intimate surrender. But the moment was shattered by a low, mournful howl echoing from the northern battlements. Are you feeling that heat? Tristan is literally willing to burn for her. If you think their love is worth the risk, smash that like button right now. And hey, I want to hear from you. If you were Elisa, would you stay and risk his life or run to save him? Let me know in the comments. Your theories are what keep this channel going. While Tristan and Elisa found solace in the shadows of the solar, the rest of the kingdom was fracturing. Victor Thorne hadn't retreated. He had gone underground, literally. In the damp, cavernous ruins beneath the city, he stood before a gathering of disgruntled pack leaders. The king sleeps with a plague, Victor hissed, his eyes glowing a manic red. He calls it a healer. I call it an extinction event. He held up a jagged shard of obsidian, the void spike. It was a relic designed to force a Lycan into a permanent, mindless berserker state. If the king won't protect the blood will protect itself. We don't need to kill the human yet. We just need to show the pack what happens when the king loses his mind. Back in the high tower, the obstacles to their union grew. Evelyn Crawley, the matriarch, began testing Elisa. She forced her to walk through the sacred grove, where the ancient trees reacted to the silver blight by shedding their leaves in a rain of dead gray ash. Every step Elisa took was a red herring, a false clue she tried to hide, but the forest didn't lie. The trees are weeping, child, Evelyn whispered, her eyes narrow and suspicious. A healer brings life. You bring the quiet of the grave. The pressure was mounting. Character growth came in the quiet moments between the storms. Elisa stopped being the victim. She began studying the ancient texts in Tristan's library, searching for a way to invert the blight. She stayed up until dawn, her eyes red, her fingers stained with ink, driven by a desperate hope that she could become the miracle Tristan claimed she was. One night, as they sat together over a map of the territories, Tristan watched her. He saw the strength in her shoulders, the fire in her hazel eyes. You're fighting for us, he noted, a small, rare smile tugging at his lips. I'm fighting for you, she corrected. The world can have the king. I just want the man. The attraction was no longer just physical. It was a soul-deep recognition. But as they leaned in for a kiss that promised everything, the windows of the solar shattered. A black arrow, tipped with the same obsidian Victor had held, thudded into the table between them. Attached was a lock of hair, golden and fine. Selena Kyle. The little girl who had warned Elisa was gone. The message was clear: the king's wife or the pack's future. The black arrow quivered in the wood, a jagged splinter of hate in their sanctuary. Tristan's transformation was instantaneous, not into a wolf, but into a monarch possessed by a cold, quiet fury. He didn't shout, he didn't roar. He simply picked up the golden lock of Selena's hair and closed his fist around it until his knuckles turned white. He took the child, Tristan said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to make the very floorboards hum. Victor thinks he can use a stray to bargain for a kingdom. He doesn't want the kingdom, Tristan, Elisa said, her heart feeling like it was being squeezed by an icy hand. He wants to prove I'm a monster. If he hurts that girl to get to me. He won't, Tristan promised, but the flicker of doubt in his amber eyes was a game-changing twist in itself. He wasn't just worried about the girl. He was worried about what the rescue would reveal. To find Selena, Tristan led Elisa deep into the ancestral crypts, a place where no human had set foot in a millennium. The air was thick with the scent of ancient dust and the ozone of lingering spells. This was the heart of the Lycan power, where the first kings were interred in sarcophagi of solid silver, the only metal that could contain their restless spirits. As they moved past the statues of snarling wolves and stoic warriors, the silver blight in Elisa's veins began to scream. It wasn't just reacting, it was responding. The birthmark on her thigh burned like a brand, and the silver light began to leak from her fingertips, illuminating the dark carvings on the walls. Tristan, stop, Elisa gasped, collapsing against a tomb engraved with the name Alistair Ludlow, stretching back to the dawn of their line. As her glowing hand touched the cold stone, the tomb didn't just light up, it dissolved. The stone turned to translucent glass, revealing not a skeleton, but a perfectly preserved man with features so similar to Tristan's it was haunting. But he wasn't alone. Clutched in his arms was a woman, her skin shimmering with the same ethereal silver light that now radiated from Elisa. The revelation hit them like a physical blow. This wasn't a tomb of a king and his queen. It was a containment chamber. She was like me, Elisa whispered, her voice trembling. The first queen. She wasn't a lunar bridge. She was the first carrier of the blight. Tristan stepped forward, his face pale as he read the hidden script revealed by Elisa's light. The truth was a betrayal of everything the Lycan history books taught. The Lycan race didn't survive because of the humans. They survived by consuming them. The sacred pact was a lie. The kings had sought out blight carriers for generations, using their sterile cold energy to dampen the burning fever. A genetic madness that had nearly wiped out the Lycans in the old age. "We aren't partners, Elisa," Tristan said, his voice breaking with a raw, agonizing vulnerability. "We're predators. My ancestors didn't love these women. They used them as cooling rods for their own internal fire. They drained them until they turned to ash." The romantic connection they had built was suddenly challenged by a legacy of systemic cruelty. Every touch Tristan had given her, every moment of shared vulnerability, was now tainted by the possibility that his biology was simply trying to survive at the cost of hers. "Are you guys hearing this? The entire history of the Lycan Kings is built on a lie. Tristan isn't just a king. His whole bloodline is a lineage of survivors who used women like Elisa to stay sane. Does this change how you feel about Tristan? Is he a victim of his heritage or is he just another predator? Tell me in the comments. I'm dying to know your theories. And if your jaw is on the floor like mine is, hit that subscribe button. The twists are only going to get crazier. The stakes were raised to their highest point yet. If Tristan completed the bond, he wouldn't be saving his people. He would be perpetuating a cycle of soul consumption. But if he didn't, the burning fever would eventually claim his mind, leaving the kingdom to the mercy of Victor Thorn. The passion between them shifted from attraction to a desperate, tragic determination. Tristan took her hands, his grip firm despite the silver light beginning to lick at his skin. "I am not my ancestors," he vowed, his eyes burning with a different kind of fire. "I don't want a cooling rod. I want a wife. If the price of my sanity is your soul, then I choose the madness." But the choice was stolen from them. A cruel laugh echoed through the crypts. Victor Thorn stepped from behind a massive pillar, holding a struggling, gagged Selena Kyle. In his other hand he held the void spike, now glowing with a dark, purplish hunger. "So the king finally learns his family's secret," Victor mocked. "Touching really. But you won't have to worry about the madness, Tristan. Because I'm going to give the pack what they've always wanted. A king who truly understands the beauty of the kill." With a sudden, violent motion, Victor didn't stab Tristan. He slammed the spike into the ancestral tomb. The glass shattered. The ancient energy of the first queen, suppressed for centuries, erupted in a violent, silver-black vortex. The crypt began to collapse, stone and spirit warring for dominance. The world didn't just end, it imploded. The silver-black vortex from the shattered tomb wasn't air. It was pure, concentrated history, and it tasted like ozone and ancient grief. When the ceiling of the ancestral crypt groaned and gave way, a massive slab of obsidian-veined granite slammed down between Tristan and Elisa. "Tristan!" Elisa screamed, her voice swallowed by the roar of settling stone. She lunged forward, her fingers scraping against the cold, impassable barrier. Through a narrow, jagged crack in the debris she saw him. Tristan Ludlow was on his knees, but he wasn't alone. The void spike's dark energy was snaking up his arms like ink in water. His amber eyes, once full of a man's protective love, were flickering violently, shifting to a pupilless, glowing crimson. The burning fever he had feared his entire life wasn't just coming. It had arrived, invited in by Victor's treachery. "Run, Elisa." Tristan's voice was no longer human. It sounded like two tectonic plates grinding together. "The wolf. It doesn't know you anymore." "I'm not leaving you," she cried, but a rough hand grabbed her shoulder and yanked her back. It was Victor Thorn. He had Selena Kyle tucked under one arm like a rag doll, his face twisted in a mask of triumphant malice. "Let him go, girl. You wanted to be a queen? Watch what happens when a king loses his soul." By dawn he'll have slaughtered half the High Pack and I'll be the one to put him down as a hero. Victor dragged her toward the secret passage, leaving Tristan trapped in the dark, screaming a sound that wasn't a howl, it was a lament. I am literally shaking writing this. This is the moment we all feared. Tristan is losing himself to the madness, and Elisa is being dragged away to witness his downfall. Do you think Tristan can fight the fever without Elisa's touch? Or is the Lycan King gone forever? Drop a "save him" in the comments if you believe in their bond. And please, if you're as heartbroken as I am right now, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. We need to stick together for what's coming next. The obstacles were now insurmountable. Elisa was thrown into the dungeoned belly of the North Tower, the very place where Omega threats were traditionally broken. Through the small, barred window, she watched as the moon reached its zenith. Below in the courtyard, the High Pack was gathering. They had heard the king's roar. They felt the shift in the air, the sudden, jagged edge of a predator who had forgotten mercy. Elisa slumped against the damp wall, the silver blight mark on her thigh pulsing with a cold, agonizing rhythm. She felt Tristan's presence fading from her mind, replaced by a void. Separation wasn't just distance. It was the systematic tearing of their shared soul. "He's going to kill them," she whispered to the darkness. "And then they'll kill him." Beside her, Selena Kyle huddled in a corner, her small frame shivering. "He was nice to me," the girl whimpered. "The king. He gave me his cloak once when the kitchens were cold. He's not a monster." "No," Elisa said, her hazel eyes hardening as a spark of defiance flickered in the gloom. "He's a man carrying a monster's burden. And I'm the only one who can carry the weight with him." But as she looked at the iron door, reinforced with silver sigils, the situation appeared utterly hopeless. She had no strength, no magic, and the man she loved was currently becoming the very thing the world feared most. The darkest hour wasn't just the middle of the night. It was the realization that her love might actually be the catalyst for the end of everything. Outside, a terrifying sound echoed through the stones of the castle. It was the sound of the great hall doors being ripped from their hinges. Tristan had broken out of the crypt. The slaughter was about to begin. The sound of the carnage below was a rhythmic, wet thud against the stones of the North Tower. Every roar from Tristan felt like a physical blow to Elisa's chest. He wasn't just fighting his guards, he was tearing through his own identity. "I have to get out," Elisa whispered, her fingers clawing at the mortar of the cell wall. "Selena, look at me." The young girl looked up, her eyes wide with terror. "The silver blight. It's not just a vacuum," Elisa realized, the turning point sparking in her mind like a flint strike. "It's an inverter. It doesn't just drain energy, it stabilizes it. If I can reach him, I can act as the lightning rod for the madness." But the door was silver-shielded. A Lycan couldn't touch it, and a human wasn't strong enough to break it. "First name Alio, last name Perlman," Elisa murmured, invoking the name of a scholar she'd once read about. "Call me by your name meets the talented Mr. Ripley." She remembered a passage about the conductivity of celestial marks. She pressed her birthmark directly against the silver sigil on the door. The reaction was violent. The silver blight, recognizing its mirror metal, surged. Elisa screamed as white-hot light arced through her body, but the sigil didn't just break. It melted. The iron door groaned and swung wide on liquefied hinges. "Go to the kitchens, Selena. Hide," Elisa commanded, already sprinting toward the great hall. "Did you see that?" Elisa just turned her curse into a master key. She's not a victim anymore. She's the architect of her own rescue. If you're cheering for Elisa right now, type "Queen" in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this final showdown plays out. We are minutes away from the climax. She burst into the great hall just as the moon hit its peak through the shattered skylight. The scene was a nightmare. The Lycan lords were huddled in the corners, terrified. In the center of the hall, a monstrous 9-foot-tall beast with Tristan's shredded silk shirt clinging to its obsidian fur was pinning Victor Thorne to the floor. Tristan's claws were centimeters from Victor's throat, but his eyes, they were gone. Just two pits of swirling, necrotic red light. "Tristan, stop." Elisa's voice echoed, thin but steady. The beast froze. It turned its massive head, a low, predatory snarl vibrating in its chest. It didn't recognize her. It saw a target. "Don't come closer, girl." Victor wheezed even as he reached for a hidden silver dagger in his boot. "He'll snap your neck before you can blink." Elisa didn't stop. She walked directly into the kill zone of the king's reach. She reached out, her hand glowing with a soft, steady silver light, not the hungry, violent glare from before but a calm, anchoring hum. "I am Elisa Bennett," she said, her voice filled with a love that transcended biology. "I am your wife. I am your peace. Tristan, come back to me." The beast lunged. The crowd gasped. But instead of tearing her throat out, the king's massive jaws stopped an inch from her palm. The silver light from her skin began to flow into his fur, turning the obsidian to a shimmering, healthy gray. The turning point was complete. Through the shared vulnerability of the blight and the fever, they had found a harmonic resonance. She wasn't draining him, she was filtering him. Tristan's eyes flickered. The red receded, replaced by a stunned, tear-filled amber. His massive form began to shrink, the bones cracking as he shifted back into his human form, collapsing into Elisa's arms, gasping for air. "Stayed," he choked out, clutching her to his chest. "Always," she whispered. But the reconciliation was interrupted. Victor Thorne, seeing his plan crumble, lunged with the silver dagger. "If I can't have a kingdom of monsters," Victor screamed, "I'll have a kingdom of ghosts." The great hall turned into a theater of silver and shadow. Victor Thorne's blade, forged from the purest moonlight-dipped steel, whistled through the air, aimed directly at Elisa's heart. He wasn't just trying to kill a woman. He was trying to sever the anchor holding the king's sanity together. "If the king won't die, the source of his weakness will," Victor roared. But Tristan Ludlow, even in his weakened half-human state, was still a predator of the highest order. He didn't intercept the blade with a weapon. He threw his own body in front of Elisa. The silver dagger sank deep into his shoulder. A collective gasp erupted from the Lycan lords. Silver was lethal to their kind, a poison that usually burned through their veins like acid. Tristan's face contorted in agony, but then the most surprising and satisfying twist of the night occurred. Instead of Tristan collapsing in a heap of ash, the silver light emanating from Elisa's hand, still pressed firmly against his chest, surged. It traveled through his skin and coiled around the silver blade like a protective sheath. The silver blight wasn't just an inverter. It was a conductor. It neutralized the toxicity of the silver, turning the weapon that should have killed him into a mere piece of cold iron. "You forgot one thing, Victor," Tristan wheezed, his eyes burning with a triumph that was purely human. "A king is only as strong as what he protects. And I am protected by the moon itself." With a roar that shook the remaining glass from the skylight, Tristan gripped Victor's wrist. The strength of the high pack, filtered and stabilized by Elisa's touch, flowed through him. He twisted, the sound of snapping bone echoing through the silent hall, and disarmed the traitor. Victor fell to his knees, his face pale as he looked up at the two of them. They weren't a king and his cooling rod. They were a singular, radiant force. "Oh my God. Did you see that? The blight didn't kill him. It saved him. They've literally rewritten the laws of their universe. Is this the most epic comeback or what?" If you're screaming at your screen right now, you have to leave a comment with the word triumph. And seriously, if you aren't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This is history in the making. The final confrontation wasn't just physical. It was a moral reckoning. The Council of Elders stepped forward, their claws retracted, their heads bowed in shame. Evelyn Crawley walked to the center of the hall, looking at the silver light still hummed between Tristan and Elisa. "The prophecy was wrong," Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking with awe. "The silver blight wasn't a curse to destroy us. It was the missing half of our evolution. We were never meant to consume them. We were meant to combine with them." Tristan stood tall, his hands still locked with Elisa's. He looked at Victor, who was being hauled away by the very guards he had tried to corrupt. "The old laws died in the crypt tonight," Tristan announced, his voice echoing with authority and peace. "From this day forward, there are no stray humans and no monster Lycans. There is only Galdoria. And there is only one queen." He turned to Elisa, the raw urgency of the battle replaced by a profound, heroic authenticity. He didn't care about the blood on his shirt or the wound in his shoulder. He only cared about the woman who had looked into the face of a monster and called him husband. "Elisa Bennett," he said, using her full name as if it were a prayer. You didn't just heal my mind. You saved my soul. The emotional payoff was a tidal wave. The lords, once ready to execute her, knelt one by one. The Omega threat had become their alpha salvation. The mystery of the blight was solved. It wasn't a weapon of extinction but a gift of equilibrium. Justice was served as Victor was led to the deepest cells, stripped of his rank and his pride. The danger was gone, replaced by a relief so thick you could almost taste it in the air. The sun didn't just rise over Galdoria. It reclaimed it. The golden light of a new dawn spilled through the shattered skylight of the Great Hall, turning the dust of the previous night's battle into a shimmering haze of gold. The air no longer smelled of ozone and fear. It smelled of blooming jasmine and the fresh, cold spray of the waterfalls. In the center of the hall, the coronation wasn't a somber affair of heavy crowns and blood oaths. It was a celebration of a union that had defied biology itself. Tristan Ludlow stood at the altar, his shoulder bandaged but his stance more powerful than ever. He wore a mantle of midnight blue, but his eyes never left the woman walking toward him. Elisa Bennet moved with a confidence that had been forged in the fires of the ancestral crypts. She wore a gown of gossamer silk, the color of the moon at its brightest, and as she walked, the silver birthmark on her thigh no longer pulsed with a cold hunger. It glowed with a soft, steady warmth, a battery of life that didn't drain the world but anchored it. As they stood hand in hand before the high pack, Tristan didn't just take a vow to his kingdom. He took a vow to his wife. We were told that our natures were at war. Tristan's voice was clear, reaching every corner of the crowded hall. We were told that to love was to be destroyed. But today we prove that the greatest power isn't the strength to kill. It's the courage to be seen. Elisa is not my bridge or my shield. She is my equal. He placed a circlet of woven silver and emeralds upon her head. The resolution of the romantic subplot was absolute, earned through blood, sacrifice, and the raw honesty of their darkest moments. When they kissed, a ripple of silver light expanded outward, touching every Lycan and human in the room. It wasn't a curse, it was a blessing of clarity. The burning fever that had haunted the Lycans for centuries finally went quiet, replaced by a sense of peace they hadn't known in generations. We finally made it. Look at them, Tristan and Elisa, the king and queen who rewrote the stars. I am so moved by this journey we've taken together. What was your favorite moment of this story? Was it the reveal in the crypt or Elisa breaking down the cell door? Tell me everything in the comments. And if you want more epic emotional stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Our community is growing every day because of you. The fulfillment of their journey was visible in the small details. Selena Kyle was no longer a kitchen stray. She stood at the front of the crowd, dressed in fine wool, holding a bouquet of lunar lilies. She was the first ward of the new royal house, a symbol that no one in Galdoria would ever be just meet again. As the ceremony concluded, the couple walked out onto the high balcony. Below, the city was alive. Humans and Lycans were working together to clear the debris, talking in the streets without the shadow of the sacred pact looming over them. Are you afraid of the future? Tristan asked, pulling Elisa back against his chest. His heart beat strong and steady against her spine, a rhythm they now shared. No, Elisa said, turning in his arms to look up at the man who had chosen madness over a life without her. The silver blight is gone, Tristan. It's just us now. It's more than us, Tristan corrected, his hand resting gently over her stomach where a new life, a true hybrid of their strengths, was just beginning to flicker. It's a new world. The story ended not with a closed door, but with a wide-open horizon. There would be challenges, yes, rival clans to integrate and ancient laws to rewrite, but they would face them together. Bound by a connection that had survived the attempt to destroy it, they looked out over their kingdom with joy, love, and a profound anticipation for a future where the moon and the sun finally shared the same sky. The Lycan King had his wife and the Weaver had her king. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the kingdom of Galdoria was truly beautifully whole. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this incredible story. If you loved The Lycan King Wants Her as a Wife, make sure to check out our other emotional scripts on the channel. I'll see you in the next one.